Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Izumi Awakened the Viridian Phoenix? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Chapter 1. Ashes Before the Flame. The night pressed down on the city like a living thing. Remnants of ash and the scent of a burnt building lingered in the air, and if you know what to smell, for a faint scent of burnt flesh was there too. The streets hummed faintly with the distant murmur of traffic, the occasional wail of a siren, and the restless whisper of the wind, but inside her small trash bin she had to move out of her previous dumpster that she only had for a few days. Darkness was absolute. The walls, cracked and rusted, bore witness to years of use. A home to her that offered nothing but silence and shadows. 4-year-old Izumi Midoriya, with ashes clinging to her hair, huddled on a pile of jackets, clothes, and shredded blankets that served as her bed, a thin, worn and torn blanket pulled tightly around her small shoulders. Her arms trembled, clutching the fabric as though sheer will could shield her from the world's cruelty. She could not remember her parents. Their faces, their voices, even their touch, were a void in her memory, a space so vast her mind had sealed it off like her memory were burned away. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she felt an ache, a quiet gnawing in her chest that reminded her she had once had warmth and love. But the memory was fleeting, and she could not cry, could not grieve. To do so would be to admit that she had nothing left in the world to hold on to. Yet in that darkness, a small spark remained, a fragile, impossible hope. She had heard stories, whispered tales of heroes who could protect anyone, who could shield even the weakest and smallest from harm. And among them, one name shone brighter than the rest: All Might, the symbol of peace. In her childish mind, he towered over the city, radiant and unyielding, a living beacon of justice and safety. Sometimes, when fear pressed too close and the walls seemed to close in, she whispered to the empty room, almost like a prayer, All Might, save me. The hope was tiny, a single ember flickering in the crushing darkness, but it was enough to make her curl into herself slightly less, to breathe a little more evenly, to endure another night. She imagined him arriving, breaking through the suffocating fear, smile radiant, taking her hand and lifting her to safety, and in her childish mind, he could smile all her pain away to make the world right again, to save her from this hell. Then the warmth began again. At first, it was subtle, a flicker beneath her skin, crawling like embers across her small chest and arms. She did not understand it, had never felt anything like it before, but she feels like she had felt this once before but can't remember. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, small blue sparks hissing faintly into the darkness. Panic gripped her chest like iron. She pressed the blanket closer, hiding her trembling hands, desperate not to let anyone see the strange heat that she could not name. It spread rapidly, climbing along her arms and legs, coiling like a living thing. Her breath caught in her throat as the sensation intensified. It was neither good nor bad, only real, a reaction to her fear, her helplessness, her instinct to survive. She could not fight, she had never been taught how. She could only tremble and pray. Someone, see me, save me, All Might, save me. Her stomach growled, thin and sharp, reminding her of hunger she could never satisfy. She had learned to ignore it most days, but now it gnawed at her, adding to the panic and despair. She pressed the blanket to her face, drawing in shallow breaths, letting herself imagine All Might bursting through the alleyway, picking her up and smiling, his towering frame shielding her from everything cruel and dangerous in the world. The thought kept her heart beating, faint but steady. Hours dragged like lead. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to her suffering. Inside the trash bin, though, Izumi's small body shook with exhaustion and fear, her mind clinging to her single, desperate hope. Every distant noise, a shout, a car horn, the groan of a vent made her jump, yet she whispered again, voice barely audible, All Might, save me. Her lips trembled as the words became both mantra and plea, a fragile bridge to a hero she had never met. The warmth beneath her skin pulsed again, responsive to her fear, to her instinct to survive. She did not understand it. She did not know it would one day protect her from death itself and become a curse that she cannot escape from. She could only feel it, a strange, quivering ember hidden beneath her small, trembling body. Her chest heaved, her lungs burning, and she squeezed her arms around herself, trying to make the heat go away while secretly hoping it would be a sign that all might was coming for her. By dawn, the darkness began to lift, pale light of the sun that filtered through the alleyway gape. Izumi lay on what she calls her mattress of fabrics, eyes wide, exhausted, trembling, her small fingers clutching the blanket. The heat under her skin had subsided slightly, but the memory of it lingered, a faint promise she could not understand. The world outside remained harsh and unyielding. She had no parents to protect her, no friends to comfort her, no heroes who had arrived in time. Yet in the depths of her child's heart, one conviction burned brighter than fear or exhaustion. All might will come. He will see me. He will save me. It was all she had, all she could hold on to. And so, despite the hunger, the cold, the shadows that pressed in from every corner, Izumi Midoriya survived. Alone, trembling, and unaware of the power that had already awakened within her a week ago, she clung to that single, fragile hope. It was a tiny ember against the vast night, but it burned nonetheless, waiting for the day it could reignite into a flame. Then one day it will become a wildfire. For now, that hope that All Might, the number one hero, would come to her was all that kept her alive. Because if not, she will die to end all the suffering, but unknown to her, she can't. Fate has other plans, her destiny is large, and it will eat her very body to revive her from the dead. The streets were merciless. Cracked sidewalks, littered alleys, and flickering streetlights formed a world that seemed designed to crush those too small, too weak, or too unnoticed to survive. For the past year, Izumi, every day was a battle against more than hunger. It was a struggle against the constant, pressing knowledge that she was alone, truly alone, in a city that had already forgotten her mother and never known her father, only a burnt chicken nugget who goes by Dabi. Although where he is a great mystery. Besides the burned corpses he leaves behind. Her small legs carried her through narrow alleyways, feet bare and raw against the cold concrete. The remnants of meals and broken glass crunched beneath her toes, making them bleed, but that didn't matter to her as she was able to get a small piece of some kind of sandwich, cold and nasty, but it was the first meal she had in days, a cruel reminder that survival came at a cost. She could not cry openly as there is no one to comfort her. She could not scream, no hero will come for her anyways, and neighbors looked away, fearful or indifferent. Her only solace was the thought that one day, All Might would appear. She whispered his name as she limped, letting it fortify her trembling, tired body. All Might, help. But hope could not shield her from the cruelty that stalked her from childhood memories into harsh reality. Her best friend, Katsuki Bakugo, or Kakin as she knows him by, had once been a companion of curiosity, a fellow child exploring the city streets. But trauma had twisted that bond. Now, his familiarity brought terror. Bakugo hunted her, almost ritualistically, each encounter a test of endurance and fear. He pushed her to the edge of survival, a cruel mentor of chaos. He would corner her in the alley behind the grocer's shop, eyes flashing, hands trembling with restrained quirk energy. "Come on, you worthless villain," he snarled. "Move faster. You're too slow." And when she stumbled, when fear overtook her small frame, his hands would strike. Each blow was precise, practiced, teaching her a lesson on her body, mapping bleeding burns and scars alike. She had never asked to learn. She begged him to stop each and every time, but it never worked. His explosions were a torment of light, sound, and fire. He would hurl a shard of asphalt or a thrown tin can toward her feet, quirks sparking dangerously close, forcing her to dive and roll. Sometimes when he was feeling extra nice to her, he would bring her food, only to crush it beneath his shoes and shove it into her trembling hands, forcing her to eat under his mocking laughter. No one interfered. No hero appeared. And still, she clung to the thought of All Might, imagining him bursting from the shadows, a savior ready to protect her from every cruel hand in the world. Izumi did not fight. She couldn't defend herself as she had never been taught, never trained. Her only defense was flight and instinct. Her phoenix quirk, unpredictable and mysterious, flared in small, uncontrollable bursts whenever she felt the brush of danger. Sparks would hiss along her skin, a warmth she did not understand, enough to make her flinch back or slip through a narrow escape. She did not know it could protect her from death itself for now. It was only a flicker, a whisper of the power she carried in her veins. Days blurred together. Hunger and fear became a rhythm of survival. She slept in empty storefronts, curling into herself to keep warmth close. She scavenged scraps of food discarded by careless hands and dodged the constant threat of Bakugo's relentless pursuit. Yet in the quietest moments, the few seconds before dawn, the faintest break in the storm of her life, she whispered again, a prayer she refused to abandon, "All might, save me." Her small frame bore the marks of each encounter. Bruises faded slowly into pale purples and greens, small cuts crusted over with dirt and dried blood. Every injury told a story she could not share. Each day, her instinctive phoenix warmth flared in response, protecting her body in subtle ways. A reflexive JRK away from a thrown brick, a shiver that intensified enough to make a quirk-induced ember flicker, forcing her aggressor to misstep. She could not name these reactions, could not understand them, but they kept her alive when skill, experience, and allies were absent. The city was loud and indifferent, yet she learned to listen to its rhythms. The hum of distant traffic, the clatter of a falling sign, the echo of voices shouting in frustration, every sound became a marker of safety or danger. And through it all Might's imagined presence was a constant. She pictured his towering silhouette, his smile, the warmth he would bring. She refused to let herself give up on that hope, though it flickered like a candle in a storm. Bakugo's torment escalated over months. Each encounter became more elaborate, more dangerous. He would trap her in dead-end alleys, force her to dodge quirk blasts, and laugh as she fell to her knees, chest heaving, face wet with tears and sweat. Each time she escaped was a miracle, and each time, she whispered again, clinging to her desperate conviction, "All might, please save me." It was a life without childhood, without safety, without trust. Yet in the midst of it, she found slivers of light in small acts of skill she could never fully explain. When she had no other way to protect herself, the faint heat of her quirk would flare, pushing her to the edge of agility, moving her out of harm's way, giving her the slightest advantage. It was her secret, her silent guardian. She did not know its true potential. She did not know it could one day keep her alive when everything else failed. One evening, as rain-slicked streets shimmered under the glow of a flickering street lamp, Izumi pressed herself against a wall, shivering and trembling. Bakugo approached, grin cruel and wide, hands already sparking. Her legs shook uncontrollably. She whispered, as she had countless times before, clutching herself tightly, "All might will come save me." And though no hero appeared that night, a faint warmth stirred along her fingertips, hissing softly like tiny coals against her skin. It was nothing she could control, nothing she could name, yet it carried her through. A small miracle, hidden in the smallest ember of a child's desperate hope. She ran again, through the rain-soaked streets, heart pounding, lungs burning, fragile hope her only shield. Every step, every tear, every shiver carried her closer to the moment she would find Haruto, the first person to give her a home, to give her warmth, to give her hope beyond the distant promise of All Might. For now, Izumi survived. Alone, terrified, battered by those she had once called friends, clinging with all her small, trembling heart to the promise that someday, somewhere, the #1 hero would come smiling and punch all her problems all away. The streets were quiet, cloaked in the gray light of early morning. Izumi's small body shivered as she curled in the corner of a cracked alleyway. Her stomach growled painfully, gnawing at her from the inside out. Hunger, cold, and fear pressed against her fragile frame, but she kept her head low, eyes scanning the empty street for any sign of danger. Then, a warm, inviting scent drifted through the air, rich and sweet, the comforting fragrance of freshly baked bread and melting chocolate. Izumi's nose twitched, and her stomach twisted painfully. The scent called to her like a distant memory of safety she had never truly known. She crept along the shadows, following the aroma like a tiny, desperate ghost, until a small bakery appeared at the end of the street. Its windows were fogged from the morning heat, and inside, loaves of bread glowed golden beneath the sunlight. Izumi pressed against the wall, peeking through the glass. Her small, dirt-streaked fingers tightened around her tattered hat. Maybe just one piece. She whispered to herself. Hunger dulled fear. It was stronger than shame. She darted to the door, twisting the handle locked. Her heart raced, panic rising as the smell of the bread filled her senses. She peered through a side window, eyes wide, watching the way the steam curled around pastries and loaves. "Hey there," said a voice cheerful bright. Izumi froze. Behind the counter stood a man with silver-threaded hair and warm, laughing eyes. Haruto Shimura. He didn't glare or shout. Instead, his expression softened with concern. "You look cold, little one. Hungry too, huh?" Izumi's throat tightened. "I am sorry, You don't have to steal," he said gently, crouching to her level. "If you're hungry, I can help. Come on inside. It's warm." Her legs trembled, torn between instinct and the quiet pull of safety in his tone. Finally, hunger won. Inside, the bakery wrapped her in its warmth. The scent of yeast and sugar and butter was overwhelming. Haruto smiled, guiding her through the back door into a small, cozy home connected to the shop. "Let's get you cleaned up first, okay? Then we'll talk about food." He filled the bathtub upstairs, steam rising as he hummed a tune, something simple, full of life. The melody drifted through the air as he helped her into the water, careful and respectful. Her skin, once hidden beneath grime, told a story of pain, scratches, bruises, and faint burns. Haruto's cheerful expression faltered for a moment as he saw the marks. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" he murmured softly. He didn't press for answers. Instead, he treated each wound with salve, wrapped them in soft bandages, and smiled again. "Good as new, or getting there?" He rummaged through a closet, then chuckled. "Guess I'll have to improvise." He snipped one of his old shirts with a pair of shears, fashioning a makeshift tunic that hung comfortably on her small frame. When they went back downstairs, he set a bowl of soup and a warm roll before her. "Eat," he said brightly. "You like this one, it's my special recipe." Izumi hesitated, clutching the spoon with trembling hands. The first taste of soup hit her tongue, rich with vegetables and chicken. Her eyes widened. The warmth slid down her throat, chasing away the ache in her chest. The bread followed, soft, buttery, still steaming. She took another bite, slower this time, her lip quivering. Haruto pretended not to notice the tears gathering in her eyes, only smiling wider. "Good, huh?" She nodded, barely managing a whisper. "Why, yeah." When she finished eating, he turned on the television. The screen lit up with colors. All Might was there, saving people, smiling even in the face of danger. Izumi's turquoise eyes sparkled, wide and full of awe. She'd seen him before from a distance, but never like this, never so clearly, so powerfully. Haruto laughed gently from behind the counter. "You like him, huh? Can't blame you. That man's a walking sunrise, Tashinori, that big oaf." He muttered the last part with a smile. Izumi didn't hear the muttered part, just nodded, clutching the couch cushion. In her small, hopeful heart, she placed two figures side by side: All Might, the hero who saved everyone, and Haruto, the one who saved her. Days turned to weeks. The bakery became her world, a place of warmth and sugar, of soft laughter and the rhythmic hum of ovens. Haruto took her shopping one day, buying clothes her size, little shirts and skirts, some with silly cartoon prints. "You can't live off tunics forever," he teased. At first, Izumi stayed quiet, speaking only in short answers. But as time passed, she began to talk about the city, about the food she'd stolen, about heroes. Her voice trembled at times, her hands shaking whenever thunder rumbled or a loud noise cracked nearby. Haruto noticed. He never asked, but when the fear struck, he would kneel beside her, offering a smile and a gentle pat on her shoulder. And then came the first baking disaster. He'd given her a bowl of flour, letting her help knead dough. She'd laughed, accidentally sending a puff of flour into the air and then another, until the room looked like a snowstorm. Haruto's booming laugh filled the bakery. Guess we'll call that a new recipe. But then, something strange happened. The air shimmered faintly. A flicker of heat radiated from Izumi's hands, subtle, but bright. The dough began to steam faintly. She gasped, pulling her hands back. Haruto blinked, but only smiled. Now that's new. You might just be a natural. Izumi's small heart raced. The warmth in her chest, her quirk, still dormant, still wild, pulsed faintly in rhythm with her laughter. Each day, she grew more at ease. The fear didn't vanish, but in Haruto's presence, it dulled. When she looked at him, at his ever-present smile and the kindness in his tone, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, not all adults were cruel. The days stretched softly into weeks. Izumi learned to laugh again, not loudly, not carelessly, but in small bursts of sound that seemed to surprise even her. The bakery became her whole world. The clatter of trays, the hum of the ovens, the way sunlight poured through the front windows and caught the drifting flour dust, it all felt like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Haruto's voice filled the space every morning, bright and full of humor. He whistled off-key, talked to the bread as it baked, and told her stories about pastries that rose with courage or defeated the evil of undercooked middles. Izumi, he'd say, flipping a loaf with dramatic flair, life's a lot like baking, takes warmth, patience, and the right timing. Mess that up and well, you get something that looks like that. He pointed at a lopsided roll she had made. She gasped. Hey, that's mine. He grinned. Exactly. Which means it's perfect because it's yours. Her cheeks flushed pink as she tried not to smile and failed. Sometimes, after dinner, they'd sit upstairs with the television on. The glow of the screen painted their faces gold as All Might shouted another triumphant, "I am here." Izumi's eyes would glimmer every time, wide with wonder and longing. One day, she whispered once, I want to help people too, like him. Haruto ruffled her hair, leaving streaks of flour in it. You already helped me, you know. Her small head tilted. I did. Yeah, he said with a laugh. This place was too quiet before you showed up. The bread was rising fine, but the mornings weren't. She looked down, the corners of her mouth trembling. She didn't have the words for the warmth that bloomed in her chest. But even fragile peace can be shaken by small things. It began the morning Haruto had to run errands. I'll be right back, promise. Guard the bakery, little hero. He said as he handed her a sweet bun before leaving, the doorbell chiming as he waved from the street. She nodded, clutching the bun, watching him disappear into the crowd. The door clicked shut. Silence pressed in. At first, she sat on the couch, legs swinging, nibbling at her bun. But then, faintly from outside, a group of kids shouted laughter, rough and loud. One of the voices sounded like him. Like Bakugo. Her chest tightened instantly. The bun slipped from her fingers, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Her breath caught. She knew that voice, or at least she thought she did. It was probably someone else. It had to be. But her mind was already spiraling, flashing to explosions, to laughter that hurt, to the smell of smoke and burned skin. Her hands began to shake. The warmth of the bakery turned stifling. The ticking clock on the wall felt like a hammer inside her head. When the front door opened a few minutes later, she flinched so hard she fell off the couch. Whoa, hey, Izumi! Haruto rushed in, grocery bags in his hands. It's just me. She blinked up at him from the floor, trembling, her small body shivering like a cornered kitten. Her breathing came in short, uneven bursts. Haruto set the bags aside and crouched down, his voice soft but steady. Hey, it's all right. You're safe. Breathe with me, okay? He placed a warm hand over hers, guiding her through slow breaths in, out, until the trembling began to ease. When she finally looked up at him, eyes glassy with tears, he only smiled, gentle as ever. See? Told you. This place is protected by the strongest hero around. He tapped his chest proudly. Me? Well, maybe not the strongest, but I can give someone like All Might a good hit, he said as he flexed his arms. That earned the smallest giggle from her, weak, but real. Haruto's smile softened. There you are. The days passed gently after Haruto told her who he used to be. Izumi started waking up a little earlier, feeling safe in the quiet hum of the bakery. Some mornings she would tiptoe downstairs and perch on the counter while Haruto kneaded dough, sunlight catching the drifting flour like tiny sparks. "You know," Haruto said suddenly, pausing to brush flour from his hands, "I wasn't always a baker." Izumi looked up, curiosity bright in her turquoise eyes. "You weren't?" she asked softly. Haruto smiled faintly, leaning against the counter. "No. I used to be the hero. Quirkless. Not flashy, not famous, but I tried to help people anyway." Izumi's eyes widened. "A hero? All Might." Haruto chuckled softly. "Kind of. In my own way. I went into places other people couldn't, helped people who had no one else to turn to. Sometimes. I even helped other heroes." Izumi tilted her head. "Other heroes?" He nodded. "Yeah. Eraserhead, the erasure hero. His quirk can nullify other people's quirks, but it doesn't make him invincible. There was a time when he got trapped during a villain attack, surrounded by civilians and chaos. I helped him maneuver safely through the crowd, guided people to safety, and distracted threats all without using a quirk. Even heroes with quirks sometimes need someone thinking fast and acting carefully. And All Might, well, there were times he faced situations where civilians were in danger, or villains' quirks made controlling the scene impossible alone. I helped cover them and kept people alive. And some of the top 10 heroes too, I helped them when the odds were against them," he said. Then with a playful smile he added, "But then again, back in my day," he said dramatically, "the villains were scary but not as scary as taxes. Those things sneak up on you." Izumi giggled softly. She began helping more too. Mixing batter, measuring sugar, even greeting a few morning customers when Haruto encouraged her gently. Most people never realized she lived there. Haruto was protective, careful, always keeping her close but never making her feel trapped. Slowly she started to feel normal. Sometimes, when Haruto wasn't looking, she watched him with soft, thoughtful eyes. He wasn't young. His hair was threaded with silver, his hands worn and scarred from a lifetime of quiet heroism. But to her, he was stronger than any pro-hero she'd ever seen. Because he didn't need a quirk, or fame, or power. He just needed kindness. And somehow, that was what made him shine the brightest. Izumi found herself reaching out more too, a tug on his sleeve when she was nervous, leaning against him when thunder cracked outside, or clutching the back of his coat when they walked through crowds. He never said anything about it, but his smile always grew a little gentler when she did. One afternoon, while they flipped pancakes for the 100th time, Izumi stood on her stool, carefully watching the batter bubble. Haruto stood behind her like a shield, his large hands helping her steady the spatula. "You're getting good at this," he said proudly. "Keep it up and I'll be out of a job." Izumi shook her head, her voice quiet but certain. "I don't want you to go anywhere." Haruto froze for a heartbeat, not because he didn't expect it, but because he knew how much courage it took for her to say it. He placed a gentle hand on her back. "I'm not going anywhere, little hero." The next morning Haruto had to run errands. "I'll be right back, promise. Guard the bakery, little hero. I'll lend you my hat so all bad guys will be scared and run away," Haruto said as he handed her his hat before leaving, the doorbell chiming as he waved from the street. She nodded, clutching the hat, watching him disappear into the crowd. The door clicked shut. Silence pressed in. At first, she sat on the couch, legs swinging. She put Haruto's hat on her head. It was simply far too big on her, but it smelled nice. But then, faintly from outside, a voice rough and loud, louder than the other kids that were laughing and running outside. "Where are you at? You worthless Deku." Bakugo had said loud enough for her to hear him clearly. Again, just like the time a few days ago. Her chest tightened instantly. The hat slipped from her head, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Her breath caught. She knew that voice, or at least she thought she did. It was probably someone else. It had to be. There would be no way he would be in this part of the city again where it's so far from his house. But her mind was already spiraling, flashing to explosions, to laughter that hurt, to the smell of smoke and burned skin. Her hands began to shake. The warmth of the bakery turned stifling. The ticking clock on the wall felt like a hammer inside her head. When the front door opened a few minutes later, she flinched so hard she fell off the couch. "Whoa, hey Izumi!" Haruto rushed in, grocery bags in his hands. "It's just me." She blinked up at him from the floor, trembling, her small body shivering like a cornered kitten. Her breathing came in short, uneven bursts. Haruto set the bags aside and crouched down, his voice soft but steady. Hey, it's all right. You're safe. Breathe with me, okay?" He placed a warm hand over hers, guiding her through slow breaths, until the trembling began to ease. When she finally looked up at him, eyes glassy with tears, he only smiled, gentle as ever. "See? Told you. This place is protected by the strongest hero around." He tapped his chest proudly. "Me." He grinned happily. "Well, I can't say that I am the strongest, but I'll gladly show anyone who doubt me a good knocking too. I had even made All Might himself run from a fight with me, ha," he said while flexing his arms and picking Izumi up, holding her at his hip while poking her cheek. That earned a smile and a tiny giggle from her, tiny and weak, but real. Haruto's smile softened. "There you are." It was then Izumi realized that it was now midday, so she helped Haruto with the bakery. That night, as she lay curled beneath a blanket smelling faintly of flour and sugar, Izumi stared at the faint glow of the oven light through the open door below. She thought of Haruto's laugh, his songs, and the warmth that filled this tiny home. And in her mind, two heroes stood side by side. One made of muscle, light, and peace. The other of kindness, bread, and dough. Both, to her, were everything a hero should be. She closed her eyes, smiling and falling into a dreamless sleep. P-I-Z-N-L-E-T-I-T-N-D. Morning sunlight spilled through the bakery's windows like gold poured from heaven. The air shimmered with the scent of rising dough, cinnamon, and melted butter. Izumi stood on a stool beside Haruto, sleeves rolled up, her small hands buried wrist-deep in flour. The wooden counter was a battlefield of sugar and spilled milk, and Haruto's apron had long since surrendered to chaos. "Not too rough, Izumi," Haruto said with a laugh, bending slightly to meet her eyes. "You're baking bread, not punching villains." "I'm trying," she protested, puffing her cheeks in mock offense. Her fingers were tiny but determined, her messy green hair tied up with a strip of cloth Haruto had torn from an old towel. The man chuckled, bright-eyed and full of warmth. "You've got spirit, kiddo. Reminds me of someone." "Who?" "Me when I was your age." Izumi giggled, the sound filling the room like sunlight in motion. Outside, the city moved as always, cars, chatter, and somewhere, the distant echo of heroes saving lives. Inside, the world was simpler. It was just Haruto, Izumi, and the rhythm of life baked into the dough. Knead, rest, rise, repeat. The bakery had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary. Every loaf she helped shape carried her tiny fingerprints, every tray bore her laughter. She even had customers who waved to her, now the old lady with the cane who called her Little Baker, and the DLVI boy who secretly added candy to her bag when Haruto wasn't looking. She didn't flinch as much when people smiled at her now. Sometimes, Haruto would let her run the register. She couldn't count well yet, but he'd help her sort the coins afterward, patient and kind. She'd ask him endless questions about everything: why the dough rose, why the sun made shadows, why he smiled even when he was tired. "Because smiling," he said once, "helps the heart remember the good things." She thought about that for a long time. The nightmares didn't stop entirely. Some nights, she woke up gasping, her small body drenched in sweat. The echoes of explosions rattled through her dreams, Bakugo's laughter, the smell of smoke, the heat crawling up her back. Haruto always came when she screamed, settling beside her, keeping his presence steady and cheerful. He never asked her to explain, never pushed. One night she whispered, voice shaking, "I don't want to be bad, Grandpa." He blinked, then gently brushed her hair from her forehead. "Who said you were bad?" "Them," her voice broke. "They said I was a villain." Haruto's hand tightened ever so slightly. "Listen to me, Izumi. You are nothing like they say. You're a kind girl. You care about others. That's what makes you good." "But my quirk." He smiled softly, bright as sunlight through the window. Your quirk doesn't make you bad. It's how you use it that matters. She didn't reply. She just leaned against him, clutching his sleeve as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. One afternoon, Izumi tried baking alone for the first time. Haruto was in the back, humming and slicing bread, while she measured ingredients to make chocolate rolls his favorite. She opened the oven, and a sudden, sharp flare of heat burst out. Flame, small but frightening, across the edges of the baking sheet. Her hands glowed faintly ember-like, panic swelling inside her. She screamed, stumbling backward. Memories flooded back: fire, explosions, smoke, Bakugo's cruel laughter. She couldn't breathe. Izumi! Haruto dashed to her side, a towel in hand. He doused the small flare with calm efficiency, crouching beside her and gripping her trembling shoulders. Hey! Look at me, Izumi! It's okay. You're not hurt. Her breaths came in sharp, panicked gasps. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's okay, he said firmly, his eyes warm and steady. You didn't do anything wrong. Breathe, Izumi. You're safe. You're safe here. The fire had vanished, extinguished as quickly as it had flared, leaving only the faint scent of scorched sugar. Haruto stayed with her until the shaking subsided, his presence unwavering, alive, and comforting. Later, they sat on the couch, her tiny body curled in his lap, wrapped in a blanket. Her voice was quiet, raw. Grandpa, that's my quirk. It burns things. It hurts people. Haruto looked at her thoughtfully, not with fear, but with patient curiosity. Then we'll learn how to make it not hurt people. She blinked up at him. He smiled, brushing her hair back. A flame isn't evil, Izumi. It can give warmth. But you just have to learn to guide it. Fire can destroy or make bread rise. Like baking, she whispered. Exactly like baking. By autumn, Izumi was stronger. Brighter. She laughed louder, smiled more. She even began greeting customers with a shy, welcome. Haruto called her his assistant baker, and she wore the title proudly. He bought her clothes that fit her small frame, soft cottons and bright colors, letting her watch All Might on television as he punched villains with a heroic smile. Izumi marveled, a flicker of hope stirring. Perhaps true heroes still existed. Perhaps someone would come for her. Autumn brought the local harvest festival, and Haruto insisted they close the bakery early so he could take Izumi out for a proper evening away from kneading dough. The streets glowed with lanterns shaped like pumpkins and stars. Kids wore capes, parents carried snacks, and street vendors shouted over one another in cheerful chaos. Izumi stuck close to Haruto's side at first, overwhelmed by the noise. Haruto noticed immediately. Hey, he said gently, stick with me. I know all the best food stalls. She nodded and followed him, eyes big as saucers. He bought her sweet dumplings, let her try the ring toss, and pointed out the fire dancer whose flames curled like ribbons. Izumi stared, transfixed. Haruto crouched to her level. Beautiful, huh? Izumi nodded slowly. She's not scared, not at all. Nope, he said, because she learned how to control it. Like you will. Izumi didn't answer, but something warm flickered deep inside her, faint and hopeful. After the festival, Izumi noticed a few things about Haruto. Haruto had a habit of turning every chore into a performance. Such as one slow morning, Izumi watched him sprint from the kitchen to the front counter, balancing a tray of melon bread with one hand like a showman. Haruto, you're gonna drop it? She called. Haruto grinned while running. And if I do, we just bake more. That's job security. He skidded to a stop, landing the tray perfectly. Not a single roll budged. Izumi blinked. How are you that fast? Secret old man training, he declared proudly. When you get my age, you have to stay 10 steps ahead of the kids who try to steal your sweets. Izumi puffed up. I don't steal sweets. Haruto gave her a knowing stare. She slowly hid the half-eaten cookie behind her back. Maybe one, she admitted. Haruto burst out laughing, bright and loud, the kind that filled a room completely. You little ninja, he said. But next time, hide your crumbs better. I can't help it, Your food always tastes so good, Izumi said as she felt warm in a way she couldn't explain, safe, seen, and welcome. After closing time, Haruto began helping her practice quietly. Not big flames, just a candle. To get control over her quirk. Izumi focused, hands trembling as a faint ember flickered in her palms. Easy, Haruto coached, not afraid at all. Think warm. Not hot. The flame steadied. Good. Now let it fade, he said. It took time. Sometimes the ember vanished. Sometimes it flared. But Haruto stayed patient, calm, and steady as stone. Despite Haruto being quirkless, he is very good at teaching people how to control and learn their quirk. You're not dangerous, he told her. You're learning. For the first time, she believed him a little. For the first time, she didn't cry after losing control. She fell asleep instead, safe against his chest, his heartbeat steady, full of life, unyielding warmth, the sort of pulse that made the world feel strong and permanent. And Haruto? He remained the same, energetic, healthy, laughing, cheerful, bright-eyed, moving about like he isn't in his 60s, a steady force in her fragile world. The bakery thrummed with warmth, life, and security. If one were to see how active he is, they would never believe how old he is, or they would just think that he has a quirk that allows him to stay active even in his old age. But no, this is what Haruto considers his retirement. For now, though, Izumi's small world was filled with flour, chocolate, song, and the vibrant presence of a man who was her grandfather in every sense she needed. The warmth of his laughter, the comfort of his hands, the safety of his kitchen, it was a fragile, perfect bubble. A sanctuary before the inevitable storm. Morning light spilled through the bakery's windows, warm and golden, falling across polished counters and neatly arranged trays of fresh bread. The air was soft and slow, filled with the quiet hum of ovens and the gentle crackle of cooling loaves. Outside, the city of Mizutofu drummed with its usual rhythm, distant horns, murmured conversations, the far-off crash of quirk battles that barely reached this cozy corner of the block. But inside Shimura Bakery, there was peace. Izumi, her small hands dusted in flour, sat cross-legged on a stool. A stack of papers lay before her, neatly folded, the ink still sharp, the corners curled slightly from the warm sunlight. She had never seen papers handled so carefully, like precious relics rather than simple documents. Haruto knelt beside her with a slow, easy motion that didn't match his age. His joints didn't creak, his breathing didn't strain. He moved like someone in their 30s, not their 60s. A lifetime of underground battles had carved a certain sturdiness into him, silent, unadvertised, but undeniably present. These, Haruto said, tapping the papers lightly, are for you. For us. Your very own adoption papers. Happy birthday, Izumi. Her turquoise eyes widened, shimmering like glass catching morning light. She leaned in slightly, fingertips trembling as they brushed the top sheet. She read her name, her new name, in careful handwriting. Izumi Shimura. You really want me to be your granddaughter? She whispered, voice barely held together. Haruto laughed softly, brushing aside her messy green hair with a gentleness that didn't match the knuckles scarred beneath his sleeves. I've wanted that for a long time. I've wanted you to have a home longer than you know. And now it's official. His smile deepened, warm and fiercely proud. From noon today, you're Izumi Shimura, my granddaughter. My family. Forever. Izumi repeated the name silently. Izumi Shimura. Izumi Shimura. It felt warm in her mouth, heavy in her chest, but in a good way, like something filling a space she hadn't known was empty. A smile, small and fragile but real, crept onto her face. Haruto ruffled her hair with his usual enthusiasm. See? Doesn't that feel good? No more alleys. No more cold nights. You're part of this family now. She swallowed, throat tight. I'll try really hard. I won't mess up. You don't need to try, Haruto said. Just live. Just be a kid. For a girl who had spent too long surviving, the words were as confusing as they were comforting. They spent the morning baking. Flour drifted through the air like powdered snow, clinging to hair, skin, and clothes. Izumi kneaded dough with fierce, tiny determination while Haruto hummed an old tune about bread and sunshine, a song only old underground heroes would remember. The ovens filled the bakery with the smell of chocolate rolls and rising dough, a smell she wanted to wrap herself in forever. By noon, Haruto returned from City Hall with the papers officially stamped. He held them up triumphantly. "It's done!" He cheered. "You're officially mine, Izumi. Now let's celebrate with chocolate rolls." Izumi launched herself into him, wrapping her arms around his stomach in the biggest hug she'd ever given. Haruto froze for a moment, then melted, resting his hand gently on the back of her head. In that moment, she believed the world truly held good things. Haruto was her home. All Might was her symbol. Between them, she felt invincible. Night crept over the city slowly, painting everything in soft shadows tinged with gold. The ovens glowed softly. Streetlights flickered on outside. Izumi sat atop the counter, wearing one of Haruto's oversized tunics, her legs swinging like a pendulum. She stared out the window at passing cars, imagining all the new things she'd get to experience as a Shimura. Birthdays. Warm beds. No fear. She hugged Haruto's hat to her chest, old, frayed, but smelling like cinnamon and sunshine. Jingle. The bakery's bell chimed sharply. Izumi's swinging legs stopped. The air changed immediately, like walking into a freezer. The warmth of the ovens dulled. A heavy, metallic scent drifted in, like blood mixed with concrete dust. Haruto's posture changed instantly. Not fear, calculation. A shift so subtle Izumi wouldn't have noticed it yesterday. But now, with a family of her own, she paid attention to everything around him. The man who entered was tall, shoulders hunched like a prowling beast. His mask cracked and dark covered most of his face. His body shifted unnaturally beneath ragged layers of clothing as cement-like plates moved across his skin, jagged and uneven. A villain. A dangerous one. Izumi froze. Haruto did not. He stepped forward, blocking her view, shielding her with his body as naturally as breathing. His voice lowered, soft but heavy. "Stay here, Izumi." But she couldn't. Fear pulled her forward by the ribs, made her chest ache, made her tiny hand reach out for him. A spark flickered in her palm, her phoenix quirk reacting involuntarily. Haruto's eyes widened. "Izumi no." The villain turned sharply, catching the movement. His eyes locked onto her. And he moved. Faster than she had ever seen anyone move. His hardened cement forearm lashed out like a blade. Crack. The strike slammed into her small chest. She flew backwards off the counter, the world spinning as she hit the floor with a sickening thud. Pain tore through her ribs. Her vision blurred, darkening, dimming, fading. Haruto's voice sounded far away. "Izumi!" Then everything went silent. And as darkness claimed her, Haruto changed. The gentle baker fell away. And the man who stood in his place, shoulders squared, breath steady, eyes sharp, was someone the underground once whispered about. Someone whose fists had saved heroes and civilians alike. Someone who fought without quirks but with technique so clean it terrified villains. The Sunshine Hero, Sentinel. Haruto exhaled slowly. And the fight began. Haruto's chest heaved, each breath sharp and ragged. The warmth he had tried to protect, the fragile light that was Izumi, was gone. The bakery, once a haven of flour and sunlight, now reeked of blood and dust. Splintered wood and shattered trays littered the floor. He crouched over her still form for a heartbeat, trembling, knuckles white with how hard his fist is. Then his eyes locked on the villain. The man's cement-plated limbs shifted unnaturally, jagged and threatening, grin wide beneath the cracked mask. "You killed her," Haruto said, voice low, deadly calm. "And now, you die." The villain laughed, harsh and brittle. "I didn't just kill a child," he sneered. "I destroyed your pride, your past, your little hope. And you? What can a quirkless relic like you do about it?" Haruto's muscles coiled. Gentle baker. Grandpa figure. That part of him gone. Standing now was the underground legend the city whispered about. The Sunshine Hero, Sentinel. He lunged. Fists flew first, precise, brutal, surgical. Elbows cracked joints, knees slammed into ribs, shoulders struck seams in the cement armor. He moved like someone half his age, weaving through shattered counters, rolling over broken tiles, dodging massive stone swings. Quirkless, yes, but terrifyingly effective. The villain staggered. You fight like a hero without quirk? I fight like someone who has nothing left to lose, Haruto growled, blood running down his hands. The bakery became chaos. Broken trays, splintered counters, flour and dust in there. Every strike Haruto delivered left him raw, every dodge pounded his muscles. Yet he did not falter. Every move bought time. Every second mattered. A massive club smashed against his forearm. Pain shot through his bones, but he twisted, rolled, and countered with an elbow to the ribs. Another crack, the villain's grin faltered. Only for a moment. Haruto pivoted, ducked under a swinging cement arm, and struck the villain's jaw with a precise hook of his fist. The villain stumbled, teeth clattering, cement plates sparking from the impact. You're fast, for an old man, the villain snarled, swinging again. Haruto gritted his teeth. And I've been faster than you before. They moved like a storm across the bakery, counters splintering, chairs smashing, tiles cracking under their weight. Haruto ducked, twisted, struck, dodged raw fists, elbows, knees, and shoulder strikes targeting weak points in the villain's armor. Each blow precise, each dodge intentional, each movement fueled by grief and rage. The villain swung wildly now, desperation in his attacks. Haruto countered, elbow snapping into a joint, knee crushing a rib, palms striking the temple. Pain lanced through his own body with each strike he took, but he pressed on. Blood ran freely from his knuckles and his cheek, sweat mixing with dust. He realized he couldn't end this fight unarmed. But he could survive. He could buy time. He could channel his rage, focus, and decades of experience into precision strikes, delaying the villain until he could turn the tide. A massive stone arm swung at his head. Haruto ducked, rolled, kicked a broken counter for leverage, and slammed into the villain's side with a brutal knee. Cement shards flew. The villain roared, stumbling back, then surged forward again. Haruto met him head-on, fists flying like hammers, elbows snapping, knees driving upward, every strike calculated to disrupt, weaken, and buy space. Every moment was pain. Every breath was fire. Every heartbeat screamed Izumi's name. Finally, Haruto backed up, stepping over debris, over fallen trays, over the chaos of the bakery. His eyes flicked to the far side to the hidden cache of his old tools. There, neatly stored and forgotten in plain sight, his kinetic charge gauntlets and Brightbreaker staff. Weapons he had once relied on, refined over years of underground battles. Tools that could finally give him the edge he needed. The villain roared, sensing the shift, swinging clubs with renewed fury. Haruto crouched, fingers brushing the cold metal of the gauntlets and the polished of the Brightbreaker staff. He inhaled slowly, steadying himself. He didn't strike with them yet. Not now. This was the climax of his unarmed brawl. The raw fight, the rage-fueled precision, the pure quirkless combat, it had bought him the chance to reach his weapons. With both in hand, he rose, muscles coiled, eyes burning with determination. The next phase was about to begin. Haruto's hands tightened around the familiar cold metal of his kinetic charge gauntlets, the faint hum of stored energy resonating through his veins. In the other, the Brightbreaker staff felt like an extension of his body, balanced, lethal, a tool honed through decades of practice. Every scar, every ache, every ounce of experience converged in this moment. The villain lunged again, arms swinging like battering rams. But now, Haruto was ready. With a swift pivot, he slammed the gauntlet fist into the villain's forearm, sending a jolt of kinetic energy surging through the hardened cement plates. Sparks flew, cracking armor seams, and the villain staggered back. Not bad, the villain hissed, eyes narrowing behind the cracked mask. You finally got toys? Haruto's reply was silent. He spun the Brightbreaker staff in a fluid motion, twirling it over his shoulder, then brought it down in a precise, crushing strike on the villain's knee joint. Cement splintered, jagged edges breaking apart. The villain roared in pain, staggering backward, but Haruto pressed his advantage. With a sudden burst, Haruto launched himself forward, gauntlets glowing brighter as they absorbed and released kinetic energy. Each punch was amplified, cracking the villain's armor, denting plates, and sending him skidding across the bakery floor. Counters came fast. A sidestep here, a hook punch there, a sudden strike to a vulnerable seam. Every movement deliberate, surgical. The villain tried to regroup, forming massive cement clubs in each hand, swinging them with reckless fury. Haruto ducked, rolled, then propelled himself with a kick off the wall, launching into a spinning strike with the Brightbreaker staff, knocking the clubs aside and smashing into the villain's chest with bone-crushing precision. Cracks spidered across the cement, shards flying. The villain stumbled, face twisting with anger and disbelief. Impossible! How are you? Haruto's voice was low, cold, and calm. I'm quirkless, but I am not powerless. The bakery was a storm of motion. Flour swirled like snow in the chaos, mixing with shards of wood and stone dust. Counters splintered, ovens rattled, and every inch of space was filled with lethal precision. Haruto ducked a massive swing, delivered a kinetic-charged uppercut, then followed with a swift sweep of the Brightbreaker staff, striking pressure points, destabilizing the villain further. The villain roared, swinging wildly, but each attack was met with flawless counters. Kinetic gauntlets absorbed and released energy with each strike, amplifying force without slowing Haruto down. The Brightbreaker staff moved like liquid steel, disarming, deflecting, and punishing. Pain shot through Haruto's body with each strike he endured, but it fueled him. Rage, grief, fury, every emotion was channeled into perfection. He had lost Izumi, the fragile light he had sworn to protect. And now, every ounce of her memory, every laugh, every moment of hope, was a hammer striking through his fists and staff. With a calculated leap, he vaulted over a table, spinning in midair. The Brightbreaker staff cracked against the villain's temple, sending sparks across the broken tiles. At the same time, his kinetic gauntlets detonated on impact, delivering bursts of energy that fractured cement armor and drove the villain backward. The villain struggled to maintain balance, massive cement plates cracking under the combined force of Haruto's assault. For a brief moment, the grin vanished from beneath the mask, replaced by raw fear. Haruto advanced, staff spinning in one hand, gauntlet sparking in the other. Each strike was precise. A jab to a knee joint, a sweep to destabilize, a punch to a seam in the cement. The villain fell to his knees, massive arms raised in desperate defense. You, quirkless fossil, the villain spat, struggling to rise. You can't beat me. Haruto's reply was a single step forward, closing the distance, staff pressing to the villain's chest, gauntlets humming with stored energy. His eyes burned like white-hot steel. I'm not here to beat you. I'm here to end this. The villain swung one last desperate club, but Haruto caught it with the Brightbreaker staff, twisting it effortlessly, shattering it against the edge of the counter. The kinetic gauntlets glowed, releasing a concussive burst that drove the villain backward, sending him sprawling into a heap of shattered tables and stone. Silence fell. Dust and flour hung in the air like snow. The villain lay crumpled, breathing heavily, cracked armor pieces scattered around him. Haruto stood over him, chest heaving, eyes sharp, every muscle coiled and ready. He did not speak. He did not hesitate. For a long moment, the bakery was a graveyard of broken wood, shattered stone, and fallen flour. Then Haruto slowly lowered his Brightbreaker staff, kinetic energy fading from his gauntlets, but his stance remained unyielding, vigilant, lethal, alive. The fight was far from over. This was only the beginning of his full power unleashed. The bakery shook with the force of the battle. Every counter, every strike, every brick and splintered counter screamed of violence. Dust and flour coated the air, swirling like a storm. Haruto's gauntlets glowed faintly with residual kinetic energy, the Brightbreaker staff spinning in his grip, a deadly extension of his body. The villain struggled to rise, cement plates jagged, cracked, and smoking from the assault. His massive arms swung in desperation, stone clubs snapping in half against Haruto's strikes. Rage and fury contorted his face beneath the mask. You think you can end this? The villain growled, staggered, lashing out with jagged fists and cement spikes. I am power incarnate. Haruto didn't speak. He didn't hesitate. He moved like a predator, coiling, twisting, spinning, every step precise, every blow calculated. The kinetic gauntlets surged with energy, amplifying each strike. The Brightbreaker staff arced like lightning, cracking through reinforced plates and hitting joints, cartilage, and soft spots with surgical precision. The villain swung a massive stone arm at him. Haruto ducked, rolled, and sprang upward, staff whirling in a spinning strike. It slammed into the villain's shoulder, snapping bones beneath the cement plates. Sparks flew. The villain howled, staggering back. Haruto's fists exploded forward, gauntlets releasing bursts of kinetic energy. Each punch shattered hardened armor, dented the cement, drove the villain backward. He pivoted, spinning, delivering a crushing elbow to the villain's jaw. Another step, a hammer fist to the chest, crushing ribs, cracking seams in cement. You, quirkless fossil, the villain spat, fury burning in his eyes. You should have died when she did. Haruto's heart burned, grief and rage igniting a relentless storm. I fight for her, he hissed, voice low, deadly. For the light you snuffed out. He lunged, staff swinging in a horizontal arc, gauntlets delivering thunderous concussive blows in tandem. The villain faltered, stumbling over shards of counter and splintered tile. Haruto pressed the attack, spinning, striking, ducking. Every blow, every strike, every movement told a story of decades of experience, skill refined to perfection. The villain screamed and surged again, forming jagged cement spikes over his arms and chest. Haruto darted forward, a blur of motion, and struck a precise combination. Left gauntlet to the temple, denting the mask and sending a shockwave through the villain's skull. Right gauntlet to the rib, cracking stone and cartilage alike. Brightbreaker staff sweep, spinning at the knees, shattering joints, destabilizing his stance. The villain crashed backward into a counter, wood splintering under his weight. He staggered to his knees, panting, shaking, cement cracking all over his body. Haruto didn't hesitate. He advanced like a storm, relentless, merciless. Every step was a hammer, every strike a nail driving the villain toward defeat. The villain gasped, "You can't kill me." Haruto's voice was calm, lethal, cold as steel. "I already have." He spun the Brightbreaker staff, planting one end against the villain's chest, pivoting, and slamming it down with kinetic force amplified by the gauntlets. The villain screamed as cement armor shattered, shards piercing tiles and counters. The blow knocked him flat, breathing ragged, chest heaving, knees buckling. But the villain, desperate and furious, lashed out one last time. From beneath the mask, a jagged blade of hardened cement shot forward like a spear aimed straight for Haruto's abdomen. Haruto saw it too late. The shard pierced his gut, rending muscle and tearing into him with cruel precision. Pain exploded like fire through his body, stealing his breath. He staggered, gripping the Brightbreaker staff with one hand, gauntlets sparking violently. His knees buckled, vision narrowing. The villain sneered, blood issuing through cracks in the cement, sure of his victory. Old man. Haruto swallowed pain, teeth gritting. Blood poured freely from the wound, staining his shirt. Every muscle screamed, every joint burned. But he remembered Izumi. Her laugh. Her smile. The tiny hands covered in flour. The warmth she had brought to his life stolen so violently. Rage, grief, and determination became fuel. He surged forward, ignoring the fire in his gut, ignoring the weakness that clawed at him. Every movement was precision, every strike final. Gauntlet punch to the jaw, hammering cement shards into ruin. Brightbreaker staff moved to the throat, twisting and levering the villain off balance. Followed by a spinning uppercut, kinetic gauntlet detonating energy into his ribs, sending him sprawling. The villain struggled, crawling, grasping at shards of cement to rise. Haruto stepped closer, staff poised, gauntlet sparking. "You took her from me," Haruto said, voice low, steady, filled with icy resolve. "And now, you pay for every second of pain." With a final surge, he lunged, staff spinning in a deadly arc, striking the villain's chest while both gauntlets released bursts of kinetic force into weak points in the cement armor. The villain screamed as the final blow shattered the mask, the plates, the very bones beneath. He slumped forward, motionless, blood and cracked cement pooling around him. Haruto sank to one knee, gasping, every breath a battle. Blood poured freely from the wound in his gut. His muscles trembled violently, pain radiating through his body. The bakery, once a place of warmth and light, was now a battlefield of shattered wood, stone, and dust. He collapsed fully, the Brightbreaker staff clattering to the side. Gauntlets sparking faintly in the aftermath, his chest heaving. He had won. The villain lay dead. But victory had a bitter edge. The life of the one he had sworn to protect, Izumi, could not be restored. The bakery was silent, save for his labored breathing and the faint hum of the cooling kinetic energy in his gauntlets. Sentinel had survived. The villain had died. But the cost would forever burn in his chest. Haruto swayed, barely able to stay upright. Blood dripped from his mouth in thin, trembling threads, running down his chin and soaking into his torn shirt. His knuckles were shredded down to raw skin and bone. Every breath rattled like shards of glass in his lungs. But none of that mattered. Only her. Only Izumi. He stumbled, nearly falling face-first into the ruined tile, but he caught himself on sheer willpower and dragged his body toward her. His vision blurred at the edges, black spots flickering with every heartbeat. His knees finally gave out, and he collapsed beside her small, lifeless body. Her green hair fanned out beneath her. Her skin was pale. Her chest still. Izumi, Haruto rasped, voice breaking. His trembling hands gathered her gently, as if she'd shatter from a breath. He pulled her into his arms, cradling her like he was holding the whole world because he was. A flicker. A spark. A warmth bloomed beneath his palms. Izumi's phoenix flame's soft blue feathers of light ignited across her chest. They drifted upward like tiny fireflies, weaving in and out of her skin, stitching torn flesh and shattered bone in glowing threads. Haruto's breath hitched. Her fingers twitched. Then she gasped a sharp, terrified inhale as life slammed back into her. Her eyes flew open, glowing faintly blue. Grandpa? Haruto exhaled a shaking, broken laugh. Relief. And a pain deeper than any wound. He smiled, though blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. My sweet girl, he whispered. Life, you must live. His hand trembled violently as he reached up and placed his old, fraying baker hat onto her messy green hair. The hat he wore every morning. The hat she always teased him about. The hat that smelled like cinnamon and warmth and home. Her voice cracked as she grabbed his shirt with both hands. No, Grandpa, please, you're okay. Her tears soaked into his collar. He brushed her cheek with his thumb, weak, gentle, and achingly warm. I knew, Haruto breathed, blinking slowly. You be strong, my little baker? His chest rose. Then stopped. His fingers went still on her cheek. His eyes closed softly. His smile stayed. Grandpa? She whispered. Silence. Grandpa? Her voice shook. Haruto? Grandpa, wake up. But he didn't. Izumi's sob tore out of her throat, raw and violent, echoing off the broken walls of the bakery. She pressed her forehead to his chest, screaming until her voice cracked into nothing. Her small body trembled against his unmoving form. Then the sirens grew louder. Heroes shouted from the street. Glass crunched under approaching boots. Izumi's breath hitched. She wasn't thinking. She wasn't planning. She was surviving. Just like he told her. She pulled herself away from Haruto with shaking arms. Her knees wobbled, but she forced herself to stand. The blue glow of her revival flickered faintly beneath her skin. She picked up Haruto's hat still warm from his head and clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. Then she ran. She ran through the ruined doorway. Ran past the flashing lights. Ran past the shouting heroes calling her name. Ran until the city swallowed her whole. Tears blurred the world into streaks of neon and shadow. In the cold night, Alone again but carrying the last warmth she had left, Izumi whispered through choking breaths. "I'll live." Her hands clenched tighter around the hat. "I'll live. I'll live." For him. Because he told her to. Because he believed in her. Because he died with a smile, holding the girl he loved more than life. And so, Izumi Shimura, newly adopted, newly loved, newly broken, became a child of the streets once more. But this time, she carried the last sunrise of the sunshine hero with her into the cold night. The small bell above the store door jingled as Izumi slipped inside, her tiny frame hunched beneath the weight of the streets. Her clothes were damp from the morning fog, and the soles of her shoes scuffed silently against the tile as she crept further in. She clutched Haruto's old hat to her chest like it was a lifeline because it was the only color in her otherwise colorless gray world. The soft fabric was worn smooth by his hands, frayed at the edges where flour dust had settled permanently into the threads. It smelled faintly of his bakery: warm bread, baked sugar, sunlight trapped in the walls, and safety. It was all she had left. Inside, the store buzzed with low morning chatter. A mother coaxing her toddler into choosing a cereal. A pair of construction workers debating which energy drink tasted like less battery acid. A cashier scanning items methodically, half listening to the old TV mounted above the counter. The television always played the morning news. Today, the news felt louder. Izumi's turquoise eyes were lowered at first, her breath shaky as she moved to hide in the aisle's shadow. But then the anchor's voice shifted soft, heavy, reverent. Something in the tone made Izumi lift her head. On the screen appeared a single image. Haruto Shimura X-Pro Hero. The Sunshine Hero, Sentinel. The entire store fell silent as if the world itself inhaled. Izumi froze where she stood. Her small hands tightened around the hat until her knuckles whitened. On the screen, Haruto's face, kind, weathered, smiling in that gentle way that always reached his eyes, stared out at a city grieving him. The broadcast zoomed out to the cathedral steps. Hundreds of people lined up beneath banners bearing Haruto's emblem, a stylized sun rising behind a shield. Rows of flags snapped in the wind. Black clothes dominated the square. Even the sky looked dimmer, as though nature itself bowed its head. And there, standing at the front, were giants. All Might, silent and still, his face carved with solemnity. Eraserhead, eyes shadowed beneath his scarf. Gran Torino, leaning slightly forward, jaw tight. Heroes Izumi had only heard about but never seen so closely. The camera lingered on them before returning to the anchor. "Today," she said softly, "the nation mourns the loss of a hero whose impact reached far beyond the public eye." Haruto Shimura, known by his hero name, Sentinel, passed away following injuries sustained during the bakery attack 2 weeks ago. Citizens from across the country gather now to pay their respects. Izumi's breath caught painfully. 2 weeks. It had only been 2 weeks, and yet it felt like her world had been cracked open for years. The broadcast shifted to archival footage. Haruto in his prime, leaping across collapsing debris despite being quirkless. He lifted concrete slabs off trapped civilians with nothing but grit and technique. He held villains at bay using nothing but his body and quick thinking. He shielded a crowd of children with his own frame during an explosion. A man without powers standing among gods. And winning anyway. Izumi's chest tightened. She pressed herself deeper into the corner of the aisle, her small body trembling as the world honored her grandpa, her home. And she wasn't there. She wasn't with him. She wasn't with anyone. The anchor's voice drifted over the visuals. Haruto Shimura's contributions were largely hidden from public record, yet he has shaped the careers of many of Japan's greatest heroes. Among them, the symbol of peace. The footage cut to the cathedral steps again. All Might stepped forward. The crowd silenced instantly. His voice carried through the speakers, deep and raw. Haruto Shimura was unlike anyone I have ever known. When I was young, uncertain, lost, he guided me. He taught me that even when you are powerless, you can still protect. That strength means nothing without heart. Izumi's breath hitched. She didn't know All Might personally, but she knew Haruto loved him. Haruto used to talk about a reckless beanpole he trained in secret. She had never known he meant All Might. He continued, voice heavy with grief. Everything I am today, I owe partially to him. Izumi's vision blurred. She bit her lip hard to stay quiet. The mother in the cereal aisle sniffled loudly, and even the cashier stopped scanning items. Gran Torino stepped up next. Short, grizzled, but his presence filled the cathedral steps. Haruto was a quirkless fool, he said bluntly, which somehow made several heroes smile through tears. But he was the most stubborn, dedicated fool I ever met. Stronger than people with 10 quirks. Smarter than half the heroes I trained. He fought like every life but his own mattered. Izumi wiped at her cheeks. The words stung, yet warmed something aching deep inside her. Eraserhead spoke last. His voice was low. Even through the TV, it chilled the room into complete silence. Haruto saved my life. And not just on the battlefield. He saved me from myself. Eraserhead swallowed once, which was more emotion than Izumi had ever seen him display. He trained me when no one else would. He believed in me before I became anything. The world will forget some heroes. But no one who truly knew Haruto Shimura ever will. Izumi clenched her fist around the hat. Her breathing hitched. Her legs shook. Then the broadcast cut to the last image. A picture of her. A still frame from a surveillance camera, fuzzy but unmistakable. Her green hair, oversized hoodie, flowers still smeared on her cheek the day of the attack. A caption appeared. Izumi Shimura missing child. Last seen the night of the bakery incident. Please report any information to authorities. People in the store murmured. Oh, poor thing. She's still missing? That's Haruto's granddaughter? A villain probably took her. Hope they find the kid. Izumi's breath left her all at once. No one realized she was right there, a few steps away, trembling behind the snack aisle, drowning in the sound of her own heartbeat. She pressed Haruto's hat to her face, tears soaking into the familiar fabric. His voice echoed through her memory, soft, warm, steady. Live, Izumi. Always live. No matter what. She squeezed her eyes shut. She wanted him back. She wanted to go home. She wanted everything she lost, impossible things. A voice on the TV pulled her back. All Might, speaking again, this time with steel in his tone. To Haruto's family, he declared, eyes burning with determination, I swear, I will find Izumi Shimura. I will keep her safe. That is the only way I can repay the man who shaped my life. Izumi's breath shuddered out of her chest. Her sobs grew quieter, more desperate. She curled into herself, hidden from the world that mourned loudly while she mourned silently. The city grieved a hero. A symbol. A son. A man who gave hope to the hopeless. But Izumi had lost her world. She held the hat tighter, her tears dripping onto the tile. She would live. She would survive. She would carry his light. Even if she had to do it alone. It's not like she can ever truly die after all. All Might's POV 2 weeks ago after the bakery attack. The sirens pierced the morning haze, slicing through the city like a warning bell. I arrived at the bakery seconds after the explosion had stopped, heart pounding, muscles tense, but even my legs, trained for speed beyond normal human limits, couldn't carry me fast enough to prevent the aftermath. The street was chaotic. Smoke curled from shattered windows. Dust settled on the asphalt, coating the fallen debris in gray. Civilians clustered behind makeshift barriers, screaming, crying, pointing. Police and medics swarmed, shouting instructions, trying to contain panic. And in the center, I saw him. Haruto Shimura. The man I had called reckless, stubborn, and brilliant. The quirkless hero who had trained me, guided me, shaped me. He was on his knees beside her Izumi. Blue flames wreathed her tiny frame, flickering and liking the air around her. The fire was uncontrolled, raw, instinctive. I froze for a moment, caught in the impossible image, the girl alive, burning bright, yet terrified beyond measure. Haruto looked up and our eyes met. Even through the blood and grime, even through the cement dust clinging to him, he smiled. That soft, steady smile that never failed to reassure, that never failed to tell you everything would be fine even when it wasn't. It didn't speak. He didn't need to. I knew. He had killed the villain. The man lay crumpled nearby, unmoving. But Haruto's own chest bore the dark stain of cement and blood. A spear had found its mark. His body trembled. His hands shook as he reached for Izumi, guiding her trembling form forward. I started to move. I wanted to be there. I wanted to reach them. But the police had formed a perimeter, pushing me back politely but firmly. Civilians blocked my path in their panic, and Izumi, small, terrified, and alive, darted from her spot like a comet in blue fire, weaving through the chaos. I shouted her name, but the words didn't carry far enough. Haruto's voice reached me instead. Izumi. Always live. He pressed something into her hands. A hat. Old, worn, comfort. My heart clenched as I saw her clutch it to her chest. Her turquoise eyes met his for a fleeting instant, and then she was gone, weaving through the panicked crowd, her flames dancing like a warning beacon. I couldn't follow. The perimeter, the panic, the fire. I was trapped on the edge. All I could do was watch. Haruto collapsed forward then, the fight gone from his body. He breathed hard, coughing, blood bubbling at the edges of his lips. I wanted to run to him, catch him, save him. But he didn't need saving. Not anymore. He gave one last look at the girl. That unwavering smile, the same smile he had worn in his bakery, in his training halls, in every moment he had protected someone without ever seeking recognition. It was a smile that carried farewell, love, and pride all at once. And then his eyes closed. I knelt beside him instinctively, but even as I reached out, the crowd pressed closer. The medics arrived, but it was too late. Sentinel Haruto Shimura was gone. The blue flames of Izumi's quirk flared in the distance, disappearing down a side street. She was alive. Haruto had kept his promise. He had lived so she could survive. He had sacrificed everything. I clenched my fists, head bowed, fighting the storm of grief and rage pressing against my chest. I wanted to rage at the world, at fate, at the villain who had taken him. But there was no time. She was alive. She had to stay alive. My responsibility now extended to her, the girl who had survived against impossible odds. Even from here, I could feel the weight of Haruto's last words echoing, reverberating through me like a bell that would never stop ringing. Live, Izumi. Always live. And I swore. I swore that I would find her. I would keep her safe. I would honor Haruto's life by protecting the girl he had sacrificed everything for. The city around me roared with sirens, shouts, and the clatter of panic. But within me, there was a single, steady resolve. I will not fail again. And though Haruto's body lay still on the asphalt, his spirit surged forward, guiding us both. The choir's soft hymn drifted over the cathedral steps, trembling in the cold morning air. Candles flickered in the wind, their flames small and fragile against the weight of grief that hung over the gathered crowd. Snapping out of my head, I stepped forward slowly, boots heavy against the stone. Every movement felt like walking through water. My heart was a hammer in my chest, each beat echoing the absence I had only just begun to comprehend. The casket rested on the lowered platform, polished with catching the pale light. Haruto's hands were folded neatly across his chest, empty now of the little things he had carried in life: his hat, his gloves, the small flower-stained cloths from his bakery. Those treasures had been given away in his final moments, passed on to the one he had loved most. I wanted to scream, to run forward and lift him up, tell him it wasn't time yet. But no words could reach him now. No strength could undo the sacrifice he had made. The somber strains of the funeral music filled the cathedral, the melody simple, yet heavier than any force I had faced on the battlefield. Each note pressed against my chest, each vibration a reminder of the life that had ended too soon. My eyes swept over the crowd. Faces lined with grief, some red and swollen from tears, others pale and silent in disbelief. Heroes, civilians, friends all gathered to honor a man who had always put others first. Everyone here was someone he had saved. It wouldn't surprise him if he had also saved animals and insects and were also here. And yet I could not find her. Izumi. She was alive. I felt it in the quiet pulse beneath my ribs, a thread connecting me to her across the distance of the world. Haruto had seen to that. And still, The ache of loss cut deep. I clenched my fists. I had trained countless students, faced countless villains, stood against insurmountable odds. I had never felt so powerless. Not because I lacked strength, but because nothing I had could bring him back. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the faint scent of bread and sunlight Haruto's bakery. It brushed against my cheek like a memory, gentle and cruel all at once. I closed my eyes. I remembered his stubborn grin, his quirkless determination, the way he had stood taller than heroes with powers tenfold his own, refusing to yield when lives hung in the balance. He had died with a smile. He had died knowing she would live. And yet, knowing that did little to dull the sharp ache that tore through me now. The casket sank slowly, methodically into the ground. Each movement felt eternal. Each inch it descended was a reminder of the finality of life. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I allowed myself to falter, head bowed as the music swelled and the crowd murmured prayers. "Goodbye, Haruto Shimura," I whispered, my voice barely carrying over the hymn. "You were the brightest sun. The world is dimmer for your absence. But I swear, I will honor you. I will protect her. I will make sure your sacrifice was not in vain." The last note lingered, hanging in the cold air like a promise. I opened my eyes just as the pallbearers retreated, leaving the casket to rest. My gaze lingered on it, etched with every memory of the man I had trained alongside, learned from, and admired. And though I could not undo the past, I knew one truth. The fire Haruto had ignited in me, in her, in everyone he touched would never die. I straightened my shoulders. My resolve hardened like iron in the frost. Haruto's light had passed to her now. It was my duty to ensure it burned bright. The sky remained gray above the cathedral, somber and indifferent. But beneath it, in the hearts of those who had loved him, his warmth lingered. And I would carry it forward. The crowd thinned slowly, leaving the cathedral steps quiet and hollow. Candles flickered against the gray morning light, their flames shivering in the cold wind. I lingered near the edge, my hands clenched at my sides, refusing to move. Haruto was gone. Truly gone. The weight of it pressed on me like a mountain, a silence louder than any explosion or clash I had faced. A hero, a teacher, a friend, and now just a memory. I thought of his laugh. The way he would scold me for being reckless, yet guide me with unwavering patience. The way he had trained me when I was young, teaching me that strength alone meant nothing without heart. He had always lived as a shield for others, and now, he had given everything, even his final breath, to protect the one person who mattered most. Izumi. The girl was alive, yes, but she was still out there, alone in a world that had just grown infinitely more dangerous. Haruto had entrusted her to life itself, leaving me with nothing but a promise I had to fulfill. I straightened my back and clenched my fists, the echoes of the funeral music still reverberating in my mind. I could not let despair take root. That was not what Haruto would have wanted. That was not what he had fought for. The city outside moved on, indifferent to the grief etched into the streets. Civilians whispered about the bakery attack, the fallen hero, the missing child. Heroes consoled families, exchanged somber glances, and carried on their duties. But I could not. Not yet. My duty was not to mourn here. It was to find her, to keep her safe, to honor the man who had shaped my life and saved countless others and now entrusted me with his greatest legacy. I looked down at my hands, still trembling slightly from the funeral. My palms itched, the desire to act, to move, to correct the wrongs that had already been done. Haruto had fought. Haruto had given everything. And I would not fail him. With one final glance at the lowered casket, I turned away, boots echoing against the stone. Every step was measured, determined. Each one carried the weight of responsibility and grief, but also of hope, a hope Haruto had died believing in. The sky remained heavy with clouds, but I could feel a faint glimmer breaking through, distant and fragile. A promise. A sign. And I would follow it. For him. For her. For the light Haruto had left behind. Izumi's POV. Izumi pressed herself against the bottom shelf of the convenience store, knees tucked tight to her chest, Haruto's frayed hat clutched like a lifeline. Her turquoise eyes flickered between the mournful scene on the television and the busy, oblivious shoppers around her. The screen was filled with gray skies, rows of heroes, and a polished casket slowly sinking into the earth. Her chest ached, a sharp, twisting pain that was more than grief. It was loss. It was rage. It was the knowledge that the person who had been her entire world, the man who had shaped her life, who had fought so many battles without powers, who had saved countless lives, was gone. And the world didn't truly know him. Only she did. The broadcast lingered on All Might, standing at the front of the gathering, tall and immovable, every line of his face carved with grief. His voice carried through the speakers, rich and commanding. Haruto Shimura was unlike anyone I have ever known. A quirkless man, yes, but his courage, his heart, and his sacrifice shaped all of us. We are here today because he gave everything he had for the lives of others. And his legacy will not be forgotten. Izumi's fingers dug into the hat. Her tears soaked the fabric, but she didn't move to wipe them away. Every drop was a memory, every memory a promise she had to keep. She could see him now, the way he had smiled at her when she had failed at rolling bread evenly, the way he had tucked stray strands of hair behind her ear and whispered softly, "Live, Izumi. Always live." The camera cut to the rows of heroes bowing their heads. Eraserhead, Gran Torino, All Might himself, each one mourning in silence, a quiet testament to the lives he had touched. But Izumi's heart burned with a different fire. They grieved him publicly, she carried him privately. They lost a hero, she lost her universe. The anchor's voice trembled slightly. Izumi Shimura, missing child, granddaughter of Haruto Shimura, last seen following the bakery attack. Any information should be reported immediately to authorities. Her stomach turned. The world mourned her grandfather, but it mourned her as a missing child, a helpless victim. She wanted to scream at the television, to tell them she was alive, indestructible even, that she had survived the fire that should have killed her. But she didn't. She stayed small, hidden, quiet. Memories of Haruto surged like a tidal wave. The day he had saved a collapsing building full of civilians. The way he had lifted debris despite having no quirk, his muscles screaming, his breath ragged, yet his eyes calm because he knew people depended on him. The way he had smiled at her afterward, his hand resting on the back of her head. And then, the last moment. Her memories burned brightest there. The bloodied cement spear, the villain who had thought he could take more lives. Haruto, bloodied, smiling, placing his hand on her cheek, whispering softly, "Live, Izumi. Live." She remembered the warmth of the hat as he pressed it into her hands, the last tangible piece of him she would ever hold. She pressed it tighter against her chest, inhaling deeply. The scent warm bread, flour, cinnamon, sunlight trapped in fabric was all that remained. And it was enough. Her gaze returned to the television. All Might's words had ended, but the camera lingered on the solemn procession. The funeral music's soft strings, mournful horns made her chest ache, but it also filled her with something else, resolve. Every note was a promise she would keep. Izumi slowly rose, careful not to draw attention. Every movement was deliberate, silent. Her small frame seemed to vanish into the shadows of the store as she edged toward the door. The people around her were oblivious, caught up in the broadcast, in their own lives, their own grief, their own distractions. Her quirk flickered faintly, blue flames weaving along her arms, a reflection of the fire now burning in her chest. She would be like him. She would help people. She would fight. She would live in the shadows where the world couldn't see her, but those who needed her most could feel her presence. The wind hit her face as she stepped outside. The city stretched ahead, dark and dangerous, but alive with possibilities. Her small hand pressed the hat to her chest. It was the only thing she had left of him, and she would protect it with everything she had. Her eyes glinted, faintly glowing, reflecting the streetlights as she melted into the night. The fire inside her roared quietly, a silent oath. She would not die. She had nothing left to lose. Only the hat remained sacred. Only the memory remained eternal. Izumi Shimura, missing, feared, invisible, stepped into the world alone. But she was not afraid. She would live. She would fight. She would be the sunrise in the dark, the shadow in the night, the hero no one saw coming. And Haruto's light, carried in the worn fabric of a hat, would guide her every step. Ever since Haruto's death, Izumi had walked the streets of Mizudafu like a shadow with a purpose. She moved silently, almost blending into the background of alleys and dimly lit streets, but the faint glimmer of determination in her eyes betrayed her presence. Each step she took was a vow, to save those who had no one else, to protect the lost and helpless, to be a flicker of hope in a world that often tried to snuff it out. Just as her grandfather had done, she carried the weight of responsibility quietly, letting her actions speak louder than words. The nights were the worst. The streets smelled of smoke, rain, and despair, mingling into a suffocating perfume of the city's underbelly. People huddled in corners, shadows trembling under the dim streetlights, but Izumi saw them. She saw the child frozen on the fire escape, the woman cornered by a mugger, the drunk staggering into traffic. Wherever danger lingered, she was drawn to it like a moth to a flame she refused to let die. And every time, the cost was hers to bear. Falling from crumbling rooftops, breaking bones as she landed with a thud, her body screaming in protest, but always she rose again. Stab wounds that should have ended her, poisoned drinks, accidents that left her barely clinging to consciousness, none of them could stop her. Each time she revived, her limbs aching as if filled with invisible fire, her stomach gnawed at her relentlessly, demanding the energy that her quirk had burned to pull her back from the brink. It was a silent toll, a price she paid without complaint. Tonight was no different. A scream pierced the night from a narrow alley. Izumi was already moving before her mind fully registered the sound. She darted forward, boots pounding against wet asphalt, her coat flaring behind her. Around the corner, a young man was pressed against a wall, a knife glinting in the dim light above his shoulder. The attacker's sneer twisted as he saw her, but before he could strike, Izumi was there. The collision was brutal. She caught the knife with her bare hand, yelping at the searing pain, then shoved the man back with enough force to send him sprawling into a pile of trash. She didn't wait, she grabbed the young man, pulling him out of reach as another figure lurched from the shadows. The fight was chaotic, a blur of limbs, grit, and pain. Izumi didn't think. She acted. And when the man's fist collided with her ribs, cracking the bone, she fell to the ground. Darkness clawed at the edges of her vision. But she rose. Her revival was almost instinctive, a spark reigniting the flame inside her. She coughed, tasting blood and rain, her body protesting, bones screaming in quiet agony, but her focus never wavered. She couldn't let them suffer. She couldn't let the innocent fall. By the time the last attacker lay unconscious in the alley, the young man trembling beside her, Izumi's chest heaved as if it might burst. She knelt, pressing a hand to the wall, letting herself rest for a heartbeat before her next move. Her stomach twisted with emptiness, a sharp reminder of the energy her body had sacrificed to survive, but there was no time to dwell. Someone always needed help. Someone always needed saving. She stood, shoulders squared, a flicker of a smile brushing her lips even as pain radiated through her. This was her way. This was her path. Mizudafu's streets were dark, yes, but she carried a flame that refused to die. And as long as it burned, she would keep walking, keep saving, keep standing between the world and the chaos threatening to consume it. Every scar, every broken bone, every hunger gnawing at her from within, it was nothing. She was Izumi, and she would not stop. Izumi crouched on the edge of a rooftop, Mizudafu spread beneath her like a living scar. Her stomach twisted, not pain, not fear. Just that hollow pull she'd come to recognize. She ignored it. Grandpa had ignored worse. She looked at her hands. Think warm, she whispered to herself. Not hot. Not angry. Not desperate. She closed her eyes and breathed. The fire answered. Not in a burst. Not in panic. It gathered. Blue flame wrapped around her fists slowly, shaping itself like a pair of glowing gloves. The heat was intense but steady, humming instead of screaming. She flexed her fingers, and the fire moved with her, obedient. Izumi swallowed. Fire fists. She punched the air once. The flame followed cleanly, cutting through the night without exploding. No recoil. No backlash. Just control. Her legs trembled. She didn't fall. That mattered more than anything. Encouraged, she focused again, this time on her back, the way Grandpa used to teach her posture when she was kneading dough. Straight spine. Balanced weight. Intent first. The heat surged harder this time, ripping the breath from her lungs, but she didn't panic. She let it pass through her instead of fighting it. Flames erupted behind her. Wings. Not perfect. Not graceful. But real. They burned blue and white, feathers flickering like candle flames in a draft. They strained under her weight as she stepped off the ledge. And caught her. Izumi gasped, heart hammering, hovering just above the street. She wasn't flying. She was staying. Her vision blurred at the edges. The hollow ache deepened, sharp and insistent. She descended immediately, landing hard and dropping to one knee. The flames vanished. She stayed there, panting, sweat cooling against her skin, hat slipping over her eyes. But she was alive. No ash. No death. No rebirth. Just her. Izumi laughed quietly, breathless, shaky, real. Guess you were right, Grandpa. Fire didn't have to consume. It could carry. And for the first time since he died, Izumi felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was learning how to live. Mizudafu did not change when the sun went down. The streets were still loud, still crowded, still alive in that way cities always were, lights humming, signs flickering, trains screaming overhead like nothing beneath them mattered. Life continued because it always did. Because stopping would mean acknowledging what slipped through the cracks. Izumi stood at the edge of a rooftop and watched it all happen without her. Wind tugged at her hair, cool against skin still faintly warm with leftover heat. Below her, people moved in clusters and currents, flowing around alley mouths and shadowed corners with practiced avoidance. She recognized it now. The way bodies subtly angled away. The way footsteps quickened without anyone admitting why. This was where bad things lived. And where help was always just a little too far away. A scream cut through the noise. Not loud enough to carry. Not sharp enough to draw a crowd. The kind of sound people convinced themselves they hadn't heard. Izumi's fingers curled against the concrete ledge. She waited. 5 seconds. Nothing. No booming footsteps. No bright costume SRNG across the skyline. No voice calling reassurance from above. Her chest tightened, something sour and familiar settling beneath her ribs. So this was how it worked. Heroes didn't fail. They just arrived later, after the worst parts were already over. After damage could be counted and apologized for. Izumi swallowed and reached up, fingers brushing the brim of her hat. She hesitated. The hat had become a habit. A comfort. A way to feel like she was still allowed to exist as herself. Haruto had worn it everywhere, inside, outside, rain or shine, like the world couldn't tell him what mattered. Izumi pulled it off slowly. The night felt colder immediately. She turned it over in her hands, thumbs tracing frayed stitching. It smelled like mornings that didn't hurt. It smelled like home. "I'll be back," she murmured, even though no one was listening. She folded it carefully. Twice. Wrapped it in cloth scavenged from her bag, then tucked it deep behind a rusted ventilation unit where the heat from her flames wouldn't reach. Where it wouldn't fall. Where it would wait. A safe place. She exhaled slowly. Then she pulled the mask over her face. The world narrowed to breath and shadow. Izumi stepped off the roof. Fire burst from her back instinctively, wings flaring wide and uneven as gravity grabbed her. Heat roared in her ears, drowning out the city for a brief, terrifying second. She adjusted midair too slow, too rough, and hit the ground harder than she meant to. Pain shot up her legs. She stayed upright. Barely. The scream came again, closer this time. Izumi broke into a run. The alley was narrow and wet, rainwater slicking the ground and reflecting neon in fractured shards. A woman was pressed against brick, eyes wide and unfocused, hands shaking so badly Izumi could hear it over her own breathing. 2 men. One laughing. One watching the street. Izumi didn't think. Fire erupted behind her, wings slamming outward and flooding the alley with heat and light. The laugh cut off mid-sound. One man spun, eyes widening as blue flame washed over him. The other reached for something at his side. Izumi moved too fast and not fast enough all at once. The knife slid between her ribs with a sound she felt more than heard. Pain detonated through her chest, sharp and NTMT and wrong. Her breath tore out of her in a gasp she couldn't stop. Fire sputtered, flaring wild as instinct took over. She slammed the man into the wall anyway. He screamed. Izumi staggered back, hand pressed to her side, blood slick and warm beneath her fingers. The alley tilted. The world narrowed again, this time not by choice. She took one step. Then another. Then her knees buckled. She hit the ground hard, rain splashing into her face, mixing with blood pooling beneath her. The pain dulled strangely, pulling inward, like the world was already starting to let go of her. Her heart stuttered. Stopped. The last thing she heard was the woman sobbing. Fire. It tore through her like punishment. Heat forced breath back into lungs that didn't want it. Pain screamed down every nerve at once as muscle knit and bone reset and her body was dragged, unwilling, back into motion. Izumi arched off the ground with a broken sound she didn't remember making. Air rushed in. Her eyes flew open. She was alive. She rolled onto her side, gasping, shaking uncontrollably as rain hissed against still glowing skin. Smoke curled off her clothes. Her chest burned not from the knife, but from the fire stitching her back together like it was angry she'd needed it again. She pushed herself upright. The woman was staring at her. Not at the flames. At her. At the way the wound had sealed. At the way a body that should not be moving was very much still standing. The scream that followed was louder than the first. Izumi flinched. Something twisted sharp and ugly in her chest. She turned and ran. Behind her, sirens finally began to wail. Izumi didn't stop running until her lungs burned worse than her wounds ever had. She ducked through side streets and half-lit corridors, vaulting fences with wings that flared too wide and sputtered too fast, leaving scorched handprints where she caught herself. Every movement felt delayed, like her body was still catching up to the fact that it existed again. She vaulted a railing and collapsed behind a row of dumpsters, sliding down until her back hit brick. Her hands shook violently. "Okay," she whispered to herself, voice raw. I'm fine." She wasn't. Her fire crawled under her skin, restless and sharp, like it hadn't forgiven her yet. Each breath scraped. Her muscles felt wrong, too tight, too loose, too aware of where they had failed. She pressed her forehead to her knees and waited for the shaking to stop. It didn't. Sirens screamed past the street mouth and vanished again, chasing something already over. Someone else's emergency. Someone else's blood. Izumi swallowed and forced herself upright. Again, she thought. You go again. That was the rule now. The second time she died, it was faster. A convenience store on the edge of a quieter block. Lights on. The door was open. Someone yelling inside. Izumi didn't hesitate this time. She burst through the entrance in a wash of heat and shattered glass, fire wings slamming outward and knocking a man clean off his feet. The clerk was bleeding from the head. The robber panicked. So did Izumi. He fired. The bullet tore through her shoulder and kept going. She didn't even feel it at first, just the sudden loss of strength, the way her arm went slack like it no longer belonged to her. Then the pain hit. She screamed. The sound startled them both. Her fire flared wildly, flames liking the ceiling, alarms shrieking as smoke filled the room. She took a step forward and her legs failed her completely. She hit the floor. Her vision tunneled. Someone was shouting. Maybe the clerk. Maybe the robber. It didn't matter. Her heart stumbled. Stopped. She came back choking on smoke. Fire flooded her veins like punishment for stopping, rebuilding torn muscle with brutal insistence. Her shoulder burned, bone knitting, skin sealing over a hole that should have ended things. She rolled onto her side and retched, bile and smoke scraping up her throat. She didn't stand up this time. She crawled, hands dragging against tile. Fire sputtering weakly behind her. She barely made it out the door before collapsing again in the rain-soaked alley behind the store. Her body convulsed as the fire finally settled, leaving her raw and shaking and very, very aware. 2, she counted dimly. That's 2. The number scared her more than the death had. The third time was a fall. She misjudged a jump between rooftops, wings faltering halfway through as exhaustion bit deep into her bones. The world tilted, the ground rushed up too fast, and there was a sharp, definitive crack as she landed wrong. Her neck snapped. There was no pain. Just absence. Fire tore her back from it anyway. She woke screaming this time, sound ripping out of her chest as her spine realigned with a sensation like being bent backward over a flame. She clawed at the rooftop, nails scraping concrete, until the pain receded enough for thought to return. Rain soaked her clothes. Her mask felt too tight. Too close. She lay there for a long time, staring at the sky. 3, she thought. Her hands were steadier when she stood. That scared her more than anything else so far. After the 4th death, Izumi stopped crying. It happened when she pushed too hard, held her wings out too long, fire roaring past the point of control. Her body overheated from the inside out, muscles seizing, heart racing until it simply couldn't keep up. She collapsed midair. Burned. Stopped. When she came back, she didn't scream. She just lay there, smoke curling off her skin, rain sizzling where it touched her. Don't, she whispered hoarsely to herself, to the fire, to whatever was dragging her back. Don't make it worse. The fire didn't listen. Somewhere between the 5th and 6th time, Izumi realized something important. Dying hurts. But coming back hurt more. Each revival left her slower. Heavier. The fire took longer to settle, longer to stop crawling beneath her skin like it resented being used this way. Her body remembered every failure, every wrong movement, every place she'd broken. And it remembered them all at once. By the time the sky began to lighten at the edges, Izumi was limping. Her wings flickered unevenly. Her hands trembled when she clenched them. Blood had soaked into her clothes so thoroughly that the rain barely made a difference anymore. People noticed now. Not just screams. Not just stares. Whispers. A woman crossed the street when she saw Izumi land hard near a bus stop. A man backed away slowly, eyes locked on the faint glow beneath her sleeves. Someone muttered, "That thing again." People are calling her a thing. Izumi stopped short. She looked down at her hands burned, healed, burned again. Then at the mask that reflected faintly in a darkened shop window. They weren't afraid of the fire. They were afraid of what didn't stay dead. Understanding settled heavy and cold in her chest. If she was going to keep doing this, if she was going to keep dying in front of people, then they could never see her face again. Izumi turned away from the street and disappeared into the shadows, already thinking about what needed to change. Izumi collapsed behind a shuttered storefront just after sunrise. Her legs gave out without warning, knees slamming into wet concrete hard enough to jar her teeth. She didn't even have the strength to catch herself properly, just folded forward, palms burning as they scraped the ground. Her fire guttered weakly behind her. Not out. Just thin. She stayed there, breathing shallow and fast, waiting for the familiar surge of heat to crawl back under her skin and hold her together. It didn't. The world swam. Her vision tunneled. Her stomach twisted sharply, pain blooming low and insistent, different from burns or broken bones. Hunger. Real, clawing hunger. Izumi frowned, confused, and then the realization hit her with almost as much force as her deaths had. Fire didn't come from nothing. Neither did resurrection. She dragged herself upright using the wall and staggered toward the nearest open convenience store, hood pulled low, wings dim enough now that no one screamed when she passed. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed harshly. The clerk eyed her warily but didn't stop her. Izumi grabbed whatever she could reach. Protein bars. Bread. Jerky. Bottled juice. Things that tore open easily with shaking hands. She also grabbed the mask while passing by it. She ate crouched behind the building, mask pulled just enough to shove food in, chewing mechanically, desperately. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't dignified. It was fuel. Warmth spread through her chest slowly. Not fire. Strength. Her breathing evened out. Her hands steadied. The ache beneath her ribs loosened its grip, and with it came something dangerous. Clarity. "Oh," she whispered. "That's how you're doing it." Her quirk wasn't just burning her. It was consuming her. And if she didn't feed it, it would finish the job and bring her back starving anyways. The next few nights became experiments. Izumi didn't stop patrolling, but she changed how she did it. She ate before going out. Boys. She learned what helped and what didn't. Sugary food gave her fast heat and faster crashes. Protein lasted longer. Salt mattered more than she expected. Water was non-negotiable. She stopped chasing every scream. She learned routes. Patterns. Where crime clustered and where it thinned. She learned how long she could stay airborne before her wings faltered, how much heat she could pour into a strike without cooking herself from the inside. She died less. Still died a lot. But less now. And in the spaces between deaths, she learned something even more important. Fire didn't have to come from her skin. It could hover. She discovered it by accident, arms raised defensively. As a man swung a metal pipe toward her head, her fire flared instinctively, but instead of burning through her sleeves, it spread outward, a thin, furious layer just above her skin. The pipe hit the fire. Melted. Izumi stared. So did he. She didn't wait for him to recover. From then on, she practiced obsessively. She forced her fire outward, wrapping it around herself like a second skin, a blazing boundary that hovered just far enough away to spare flesh and fabric alike. It took focus. It took energy. It took failure after failure. But it worked. Her clothes stopped disintegrating. Her burns stopped stacking. For the first time since she'd started, she finished a night of patrol without smelling like smoke and blood and ruined fabric. She laughed, then quiet and shocked and a little unhinged. "I can wear clothes," she murmured to the empty street. "That's new." The costume came next. Not scraps this time. Intentional choices. Dark fabric, reinforced where it needed to be. Seams sewn tight and repaired when they frayed. Sleeves long enough to hide scars. Gloves that let her feel heat without sacrificing skin. And the mask still matte black and expressionless, but now fitted properly, anchored so it didn't slip when she moved fast or hit hard. She tested it again and again, letting her fire flare, forcing it outward, watching the way the heat traced her silhouette without touching her. A burning outline. Not a burning girl. Satisfied, Izumi stood in front of a darkened window and looked at herself. For once, she didn't look like someone waiting to die. She looked like something prepared. That was the night she wore the hat again. She hesitated with it in her hands, fingers curled tight around the brim. The rule had been simple before. Hat off meant fire. Fire meant death. But now she didn't expect to die every time she stepped out. She settled it onto her head carefully, pulling it low beneath the hood, shadowing her eyes. The fire stayed where she told it to. Didn't burn the fabric. Didn't reach for it. Izumi exhaled slowly. "Okay," she said. "You behave. I'll behave." The fire flickered in response, contained and bright. The city noticed the difference. She moved faster. Hit harder. Left scenes cleaner. Criminals didn't laugh anymore. They ran or they froze, staring at the dark figure with wings of controlled flame and a mask that never changed. She stopped dying in alleys. Stopped collapsing in the open. When she did get hurt, she retreated, recovered, and adapted. People stopped screaming when they saw her. They started backing away instead. Whispers changed tone. She didn't burn the place down. She knew where to hit. She saved someone and left. Someone filmed her one night, just a glimpse, fire flaring as she landed between a man and his target. The comments called her efficient. Izumi didn't know how to feel about that. But she kept going. Because the heroes were still late. Now she knew how to last until they arrived. Izumi stopped being invisible sometime after the third week. She didn't know exactly when it happened. There was no clear line, no moment where the city turned and decided to look, but she felt it in the way people reacted to her presence. Not screams anymore. Not frozen shock. Recognition. She landed hard on a rooftop overlooking a crowded intersection, boots cracking against concrete, fire flaring briefly behind her before settling into a controlled, hovering outline. Below, a mugging dissolved mid-act. One man dropped what he'd stolen and ran without looking back. The other raised his hands slowly, eyes never leaving the dark figure above. Izumi watched for 3 seconds. Then she turned and moved on. Efficiency became her signature. She stopped chasing everything and started choosing. Patterns emerged, blocks that went quiet too suddenly, alleys that swallowed sound, corners where fear gathered before violence followed. She learned how criminals moved when they thought no one important was watching. She learned how to make them wrong. Her fire no longer exploded unless she wanted it to. It coiled above her skin like a living thing, contained and precise, leaving her clothes untouched. Wings flared only when necessary. Strikes ended fights, quickly burns just hot enough to incapacitate, not enough to kill. She didn't linger. She didn't pose. She didn't speak unless she had to. People started saying she was clean. Izumi wasn't sure how she felt about that. The first time someone thanked her, she almost dropped to her knees. It was a man pinned beneath a collapsed scaffolding, leg trapped at a wrong angle, panic already stealing his breath. Izumi burned through the metal supports with careful, shaking control, lifting just enough to drag him free before the whole thing gave way. He stared at her like he expected her to vanish. "Thank you," he said finally, voice hoarse. You didn't even burn me." Izumi froze. She wasn't sure what to do with that. "You should get checked," she said after a moment, voice distorted by the mask. Careful. Internal injuries." Then she stepped back and vanished into the night before he could say anything else. She didn't die that night. That too was new. The city adapted around her presence. Police scanners started including vague warnings: unknown vigilante activity, blue flames, avoid engagement. Civilians shared shaky videos online, a silhouette landing between attacker and victim, fire wings unfurling briefly before snapping closed again. Comments argued about what she was. A villain. A rogue hero. A quirk experiment gone wrong. Someone called her an omen. Izumi never watched long enough to see what stuck. But the name did. It moved from whispers to expectation. From rumor to pattern. "She'll show up," someone said during a late-night standoff, voice tight with hope and fear tangled together. "She always does." Izumi landed behind the threat seconds later. She ended it in under 10. She started wearing the hat every night. Pulled low beneath the hood, brim shadowing her eyes. The fire obeyed now, hovering cleanly above fabric and skin alike, never touching what mattered. It grounded her. When the night stretched too long, when her body ached with remembered deaths and accumulated exhaustion, she touched the brim briefly, just enough to remind herself she was still real. Still here. Still choosing this. She didn't expect gratitude. She didn't expect forgiveness. She expected work. And the city kept giving it to her. By the time dawn broke, Muzutafu had a new rule it didn't say out loud. Blue fire burned in the distance. Someone has been saved, just like the vigilante Dabi. That night, far away from where Izumi was, blue flame burned higher. It reflected in rain-slicked pavement, fractured in puddles, mirrored in darkened glass as a man landed at the edge of a quiet street. His patrol was over. Smoke curled lazily from scorched concrete and melted slag behind him. White hair caught the streetlight. Burned skin pulled tight along his jaw. He exhaled slowly and pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen lit up with a photo, his wife smiling, arm around a small green-haired girl grinning far too brightly for the camera. He stared at it longer than he meant to. Then he sighed and locked the screen, tucking the phone away. "You're as slippery as your mother, Izumi," he muttered, blue fire flickering faintly around his fingers. His gaze lifted to the city skyline. "Just where are you?" Attention changed the shape of the night. Izumi felt it first in the pauses, those moments where violence hesitated, where criminals looked up instead of around, where fear sharpened into calculation. She wasn't just interrupting crimes anymore. She was anticipated. Police response times shortened in the areas she frequented, not fast enough to help, but fast enough to complicate things. Patrol cars cruised streets she used to move through freely. Radios crackled more often when blue fire flared, voices tight with uncertainty. Heroes noticed too. Not faces. Not names. But patterns. Someone followed her once, kept their distance, careful and skilled. Izumi slipped away anyway, fire dimmed and controlled, boots silent against rooftops she knew better than anyone else. Still, the message was clear. The city was beginning to look back. That night, she ended her patrol early. She retrieved her hat that was knocked off, settled it onto her head, her mask now cracked and missing a piece of it all from her last fight that she just had, and disappeared before dawn could paint her silhouette into something recognizable. The Viridian Phoenix had become the city's rumor and the world's question mark. But to All Might, she wasn't a mystery. She was Haruto Shimura's adopted granddaughter. She was his legacy. And he knew one day he would find her before the fire that refused to die burned itself away. The city of Muzutafu stretched endlessly beneath the night sky, a sea of lights flickering like distant stars that didn't care who was lost among them. Sirens echoed far below, neon signs buzzed, and the wind carried the familiar scent of smoke, rain-soaked concrete, and old food. On the edge of a rooftop, a small figure crouched low. Izumi hugged a tattered brown hat tightly to her chest, Grandpa's hat. The fabric was frayed, worn thin by time and grief, but she clung to it like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Her turquoise eyes were swollen and red, tears cutting clean trails through the grime on her cheeks. Her hair was tangled, unwashed, clinging to her face as the wind tugged at it. "I wish you were still here," she whispered, voice breaking. "I miss you every day. I can't. I don't know how to do this alone." Her shoulders shook as quiet sobs racked her small body. The city kept moving beneath her, uncaring, unaware of the child perched above it, a child who had survived too much for too long. She pressed her face into the hat, breathing in the faint scent of flower and warmth that was almost gone now. A presence. Not loud. Not sudden. A voice cut gently through the night. "Easy now," it said, calm and steady. "I don't mean you any harm." Izumi reacted instantly. Flames burst to life around her, cyan blue and feathered, phoenix wings flaring wide as her hair ignited with the same soft, burning glow. Small fire claws formed around her fingers, heat radiating in warning rather than attack. She staggered to her feet, tears still as in her face, eyes sharp despite the fear. A massive figure stepped into the moonlight. Broad shoulders, golden hair catching the glow of the city. A presence that felt impossibly solid. "All Might." Izumi froze. "All Might?" she whispered, disbelief cutting through her fear. The symbol of peace raised his hand slowly and lowered himself to one knee, making himself smaller despite his towering frame. "That's right," he said gently. "I'm sorry if I startled you." His eyes softened when he saw the hat clutched to her chest. "And you must be Izumi Shimura." Her breath hitched. "You know my name?" All Might nodded once, solemn. "I've been looking for you," he admitted quietly. "Not as a hero chasing a rumor, but as someone who owed your grandpa far more than I ever repaid." At the sound of Grandpa, her claws trembled. The flames flickered but didn't vanish. "You knew him?" she asked, voice small. All Might's smile faded into something heavier, reverent. "Haruto Shimura was my teacher," he said. "Before the world knew me as All Might, he taught me what it meant to stand back up when you had nothing left." Izumi's grip on the hat tightened painfully. "He taught you?" "Yes," All Might said. "He trained me, guided me, protected me when I didn't even realize I needed it." His jaw tightened. "And when he died, I was too late." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Izumi's flames finally faded, wings dissolving into embers as her legs gave out. She sank to her knees, sobs tearing free at last. "I miss him," she cried. "I don't know how to be strong like he said. I don't know how to stop hurting." All Might moved without hesitation, kneeling beside her. He didn't pull her close. He didn't rush her. He simply placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to," he said softly. "Not alone. Not anymore." She looked up at him through tears. Would he really be proud of me?" All Might answered without hesitation. Yes. The word was firm. Certain. He would be proud that you survived. Proud that you protected yourself. Proud that you're still standing after everything the world threw at you. Izumi's breathing slowly steadied, her sobs quieting as the weight in her chest loosened, not gone, but no longer crushing. All Might smiled gently. And now, he said, it's my turn. Her eyes widened. I couldn't save him, he admitted. But I can keep his promise. He stood and offered his hand, not like a hero offering rescue, but like a guardian offering certainty. No more rooftops. No more running. No more fighting alone. Izumi hesitated only a moment before clutching the hat tighter and reaching out. For the first time in nearly 2 years, she let someone else hold the night at bay. Izumi's fingers trembled as she took All Might's hand. It was warm. Solid. He rose slowly, careful not to pull her too fast, and guided her away from the edge of the rooftop. The city still glimmered below, loud and restless, but for the first time it felt distant, like something she didn't have to fight alone anymore. She glanced back once, just once, at the ledge where she had cried and wished and nearly broken. Then she followed him. All Might draped his cape gently around her shoulders, shielding her from the night air and the curious eyes of the city below. The fabric smelled faintly of sunlight and steel, strange, but comforting. Izumi instinctively clutched Grandpa's hat beneath it, holding it close to her heart. Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere safe," All Might replied. "First, we get you checked by a doctor. Then we talk." He paused, looking down at her with seriousness that cut through his usual heroic warmth. "There are things the world needs to know about you," he continued. "And things you deserve to hear. But not tonight. Tonight is about rest." Izumi nodded slowly. As they descended from the rooftop, distant sirens began to grow louder, not panicked, not violent, but official. Patrol lights flickered far below, reflecting off glass and steel. All Might's expression hardened for just a moment. "The city's been searching for you," he said gently. "Not all of them with good intentions." Izumi stiffened. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "I know," he said immediately. "And you won't face it alone." He glanced toward the skyline, jaw tightening as if already preparing for conversations he knew were coming with the police, the heroes, the commission, and with himself. They moved through the night quietly, unseen by most, until the noise of the city softened behind them. Izumi's steps grew slower, exhaustion finally catching up now that she wasn't running anymore. All Might adjusted his pace without a word. By the time they reached the street below, her head had tipped forward, resting lightly against his side, breath slow and uneven. She was asleep. All Might looked down at her small, scarred, clutching a frayed hat like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Rest well, Izumi Shimura," he murmured. "You've carried enough." Above them, the city lights continued to burn. And somewhere not far away, the world was already preparing to ask questions.